Hello and welcome to this first lecture of this new course, Mastering Game Theory. And we are beginning to look at the overview of this whole game theory. So in this particular lecture, we will talk to you about what is game theory. And in this section of 4 lectures, we will give you an overview of the game theory. And then we will get into the details in the further sections, right? So what do you think is game theory? Any thoughts? You must have heard the game theory. So, what is game theory according to you? So, game theory is a branch of mathematics and economics. So, from a lineage point of view, it belongs to mathematics economics that studies strategic interactions among the rational decision makers, not emotional decision makers. And game theory provides a framework for analyzing situations in which the outcome of each participant depends on the action of all other participants. So that's the basic definition of game theory. Now, what are some of the key concepts and components of the game theory? Let's take a look at as we go forward. So, first key component is obviously the players. Now, who are the players? The players are the decision makers in the game, people who take decisions. Now, any kind of a game. If it is a football, then the people who kick, people who defend. If it is management, people who make management decisions. And the whole assumption and theory behind is that each player aims to maximize his or her own payoffs. So each one is playing for himself or herself. So they play for themselves and maximize their payoffs, right? So each player is maximizing their payoffs. The second thing is the key concept is the strategies. Now, what are strategies in the context of game theory? They are possible actions as illustrated by this yellow arrow. They are possible actions or plans of action that each player can take. And I'm only illustrating here one to keep this image simple. Now, a strategy can be a simple move or a complex plan of multiple moves. So that's what the second component of the game theory is. The third is the games themselves. Now, what are games? The games are the scenarios being analyzed and they can be classified into different types, right? Like cooperative versus non-cooperative. So in cooperative games, players can form binding commitments, coalitions, while the non-cooperative form games, they cannot. So if you have a binding commitment to each other and to some players, then it is a cooperative game, otherwise it's a non-cooperative game. Then there is symmetric versus asymmetric games. Now, what are these? In symmetric games, the payoff depends only on the strategies employed, not on who is playing. So it is independent, irrespective of the person who is playing. On asymmetric games, the payoffs differ based on the player's identity. The same move played by one player, you will get a different payoff. If another player plays, you get a different payoff. Then there are zero sum and non-zero sum games. In zero sum games, one player's gain is exactly equal to the another player's loss. So one person's gain is other person's loss. Net gain is zero. In non-zero sum games, the total payoff of players can vary. It need not be 0, 1. So people kind of lose and they win, but overall winning can be higher, overall losses can be higher. Then there are simultaneous versus sequential games. In simultaneous games, all players make the decisions or moves at the same time. And in sequential games, players make the decisions in turn, often with some players having knowledge of the previous actions. So that are the different kind of games that are there in the game theory. Let us look at another concept called Nash equilibrium. So what is Nash equilibrium? See, it's a key concept in the game theory named after John Nash, and this is a position in the game where no player can gain unilaterally changing their strategy if the strategies of other person remain same. So it's a case of a equilibrium. If someone else doesn't change your strategy, is his or her strategy, and if you change your strategy, you're going to lose. You're not going to. So it's a case of a mutual respect. So it represents a state of mutual best responses. And don't worry, we will explain that as we go forward. But just be aware of one component or one concept of the Nash equilibrium. Then there is a concept of dominant strategy. And what is a dominant strategy? A dominant strategy is the strategy that is best for a player regardless of what strategies other players choose. So, irrespective of what other players do, that is the best for you. And if all players have a dominant strategy, the game has a dominant strategy equilibrium. Everyone does what is best for them, right? And that becomes the Nash equilibrium. Then there are mixed strategies. And this is a bit complicated, but let's take a look at this. This is a strategy where a player chooses among possible actions according to a probability distribution. And this is used in games where pure strategies, no single action can yield a Nash equilibrium or equilibrium. Let's take an example of a goal, a footer game. It is a shootout and you get to kick for your game. Which way would you kick? Now, if you kick right, the goalie can always go right and block you, right? Now, so it's a 50-50 chance. Maybe flip a coin each time? Not really. So each player has a better side, right? And if you have typically a better side of scoring 40% time when you're kicking left or 70% when you're kicking right, your payoffs would be represented something like this. If you kick left and if the goalie blocks, obviously you get nothing. Your scores are in orange, the goalie's scores are in blue, so you get nothing. Now, if you kick left and the goalie goes right, there's a 40, since your score is, for probability is 40% of you scoring, your score is 0.4. And similarly, if you kick right and the goalie goes right, he blocks it or she blocks it and you get a 0 as in orange. But if you kick left and the goalie goes right, then there's a score of 0.7 because you are 70% of the time you're kicking right and you're hitting the case. So that's what the game is. Now let's come to some interesting part. So let's have some fun and try to outsmart the goalie. So if you were to always kick left, they will always block left, the result is 0. If you always kick right, they will always block right and your result will be again 0. How about if we kick 50% randomly? Let us see what happens. Then they are always best blocking right. So that is your best case. And in the half the time we will get 0.4. So 50% of 0.4, that's your reward. So you get 0.2. So if you think they are always going to block right, then we could add few extra lefts, natural common sense. So they won't be there. So supposing you now go 50% left, then your result will be 0.6 into 0.4, right? You're kicking left, they are going right, and as a result of that, and you're doing that 60% of the time, so your score is 0.6 into 0.4 is equal to 0.24. You got that? Now, supposing if we further take it forward and go 70% left. Now, result you think should be 0.74 into 0.4 now, 0.28, even better. No, they get now wise enough, right? And they start blocking left. So instead you get now 0.3 into 0.7. 1 minus 0.3, 1 minus 0.7 into 0.73, 0.3, 70%. So you get 0.21. So life is like that. So that's what is a mixed strategy. So in this mixed strategy, you choose among a possible action according to a probability distribution. You don't play a move again. And obviously this is to be used in the games that are repetitive. You do the same thing many times in a particular year or a time period that is under consideration for the game, right? Right. So let's look at what is the optimal place. Now let's let the K stand for how often should we kick left, your bad side. So your score will be 0.4 into 0.K. till certain point of time. Now, what is that point of time? That point of time be 0.72 minus 1k. So you put these equal and you get a k of 0.254. So your best strategy is to kick randomly 64% of the time, right? You got that? Wonderful. Now, there's another concept called extensive form games. Now, what are the extensive form games? Now, extensive form games represent games with a tree structure showing the sequential nature of decisions and possible moves at each decision point, including chance moves and information sets. And if you see in your figure here, the player A has two possible moves, strategy and strategy B, and once if player 1 takes strategy A, player 2 can take again two strategies A and B with their respective payoffs P1A, P2A, P1A, P2B, and similarly if the strategy player takes strategy B, player 2 can take strategy A and B, and then there are corresponding payoffs. So this is the representation of the game in an extensive form in a tree structure, and we will use that and we will take a look at that as we go forward. Similarly, repeated games are where your situations where game is played multiple times, as we were seeing in the mixed strategy, allowing for strategy that consider past actions, history, and future consequences or reputations. So, net, what is game theory? Game theory is applied to various fields. It is a way in which you can analyze what are the outcomes, and it is applied to various fields such as economics, politics, political science, psychology, biology, computer science, and even military. And it helps in understanding and predicting the behaviors of individual firms and nations in strategic settings. So having looked at what is game theory, what do we do next? We will now look at what careers can you take after learning game theory, right? Ready for that? Wonderful. So thank you so much for watching this first overview lecture in this course, Mastering Game Theory. I hope you're beginning to learn new things, beginning to enjoy. And I do look forward to see you again in the next lecture. Please feel free to message me if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer your question, and also download the PDF file to take a look at anything that you need.